Hello and welcome back to another video. I'm Zelp and today we are going to take a look at critical. Now this whole idea is kind of inspired by someone on Discord called Tara. He talked about how Distant Observer has a video like about 3 years ago talking about critical and says something along the lines of if you have 20% or at least 20% critical chance on your weapon, then you should go for a critical build. And after watching that video, a lot of questions kind of like came into mind, like why 20%, and why did he not talk about critical damage? Because if the critical damage increase is really low, 20% or not, it's not going to make much of a difference. It's probably not worth modding for. So I want to have a deeper look on critical and eventually come to a conclusion of how many critical chance or critical damage do you need before you should consider going on a critical build. There are also some of you that asked me to make a video for comparison between critical and also status. The problem is status is very subjective. It depends on what kind of status and what kind of mod do you want to put for a status build, because like dual stat mods also give you elemental damage, and if you compare it like that with other factors in it, you're not going to get a very clear outcome or result that is good to compare. It's almost like comparing apple and oranges in that sense. So you really have to narrow down the condition, like maybe you only have 2 slots left and you either use 2 dual stat mods or 1 point strike and vital sense, and which one should you go for. In that situation, we can sort of like come up with a conclusion, but in general it's kind of hard. It depends on the weapon, it depends on the status that you're using, it depends on the enemy. There's just so many things to consider. So in today's video, we're kind of going to go through a part 1-ish of a critical analysis. After going through this one, you'll have a better understanding of why the second part is the way it is, and also understand what the second part is pretty much going to be talking about. And in this video, we are pretty much trying to make critical chance and critical damage multiplier into a average, so that we can see and then we can compare. And we're also going to do a small simple comparison at the end of this video. Now before I go any further, I do want to give a small little shout out to Kiros Shadow from my Discord. Basically he made one of these. According to him, he said that it was inspired by my video, so he has some of the components that I have in my last video where we calculated EHP and stuff, but he added a lot more things. Now I didn't go through the numbers, but if everything is correct, his one is probably more impressive than mine. So I'll pin up the link to this spreadsheet at my Discord Warframe lobby for a few days. If you guys want to see, go ahead and check it out. Okay, so now let's talk about critical. I'm going to give you some scenarios and then try to make sense of why I could kind of come out with the average damage from the critical. So let's say you hit an enemy 10 times. Okay, 10 times. And each time you hit, you do 10 damage. So 1 time, 2 time, 3 time. I'm going to put some numbers here so that we know how many times, so we have a rough idea. Let me just pull this to all the way to 10. Is this 10? I feel like this is 10. Oh, this is 11. Okay, and then from here, we pull this and we have 10 hits of 10 damage, right? So now, if you were to add them all out, so let's say total damage, it will be equals to the sum of all these values, which is 100, right? So it did 100 damage by hitting an enemy 10 times for 10 damage each. Now, a critical works like this. If the same scenario applies, but this time I have a critical chance of, let's say, 20%. What did I just spell? Chance of 20%. And let's say the critical damage is 200% or 2, right? In your arsenal, it's going to display as 2, but let's call it 200%. So what is going to happen is that in the 10 times that you attack, okay, I'm just going to copy this and put it down here. In this 10 times, 20% out of these 10 hits is going to crit, right? In layman terms, that's pretty much what's going to happen. Of course, it can vary because we are playing with probability. It could be 3 out of 10, it could be 4 out of 10, but in general, when you say 20% out of 10 hits, is about 2 hits out of 10 hits. So let's say the first 2 did a critical. So this 2 is going to be a critical. Let's just highlight it real quick, and then let's say since when it crits, it does a 200% damage. So when it crits, this value, instead of just putting 20, I want to make it a little bit more fancy. Let's say equals to this value times 2, because it's 2, right? And then we'll pull it out. So now we have this much. And the other 80% is not going to crit. So it's still going to be the exact same thing. So let's pull that down, right? So now if you look at the total, damage, this one did 100 damage if you do not have any critical on. But when you do crit and you crit twice, maybe I should do it like this. If you crit and you crit twice, then you are going to do a total of 120 damage with a critical damage multiplier of 200%. Now with this value, what's interesting is you can actually calculate how much damage increase because of critical chance and critical damage. So based on this, I can very easily tell you it's an extra 20%, but if you want to work out the formula, it's going to be 100 equals to 120, or rather this value divide by this value and then multiply by 100, or we can see it in decimals, which is 100. You get this one is basically 120% out of this. So if you want it in how much it increased, it should be negative -1. There you go. So it's 20% extra damage. So let's see what happens if we put in Point Strike, which is this one that gives you 150% critical chance, and also Vital Sense, which gives you a extra 120% critical damage. Okay, so let's do the calculation. Okay, so after Point Strike, the critical chance from 20% or 0.2 is going to be increased by times 1 plus 1.5 because it increases by 150%. All right. So let's put a equal sign at the front so that we can actually just straight away get the answer to it. Ugh. Oh my god, I can't click. Okay, so we have now 50% critical chance, and for critical damage from 2, if we were to add Vital Sense, I believe it's 1.2, 120%. I could be wrong, I'll double check in just a bit. Yes, 120%. So therefore my critical damage multiplier is 440% now. Now let's take a look and see how much do we get. So again, the same scenario, but this time 50% of the time is going to crit. So let's put in 10, 10, 10. I'm drawing it out so that you guys can see it clearer and you have a better understanding instead of just showing you a bunch of numbers and some might not get. So with 50% critical chance, this means that 50% out of the number of times they do is going to crit. So let's say the first 5 times were to crit, right? So that means these 5 is going to do more damage. But how much more damage? It's going to be 10 times this multiplier, 4.4. So if it's 10 times 4.4, you're going to do 44 damage. So 44 damage for 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then the rest is going to stay as 10 damage. Now, if I were to calculate the sum, we're going to get this value, but you have to keep in mind that the weapon itself originally started with 20% critical chance and 200% critical damage. This means that we cannot use 100 for our calculations to really know how much Point Strike and Vital Sense actually increase in terms of damage in percentage. You cannot use this 100 because this 100 is without critical chance and critical damage from the weapon itself. So we actually have to take this one. This is the base. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, I'm going to write it out first. So take this new value, 270, divide by 120, right? And that will give you the ratio for how many percent that has actually increased, we actually need to do one more thing. So like just now, we need to minus 1 and get your answer. So basically I can just take this one, I can copy it, I can put an equal sign here, and we learned that we have actually increased the overall damage by 125% by adding Point Strike and Vital Sense. Now this is the part where you can think for yourself really easily. If you have two elemental mods that gives you 90%, and if you add them up, it's going to give you 180%. And let's say you have only 2 slots left, and you're struggling to think, should I go with critical or should I go with 2 elemental mods instead? So elemental mods is going to give you 180% extra damage, whereas with a weapon that has 20% critical chance and 200 critical damage multiplier, with Point Strike and Vital Sense, you're only gonna get 125%. So just like that, you know for sure that you should go for the elemental mod and not critical. So this is where I say it really factors in a lot of different variables, and it's not as easy as saying something like, oh, if the weapon has 20%, then you should, go for critical, because there are many multipliers. In fact, if you really think about it and you don't have elemental mods on your weapon and you have 2 slots available, going for critical is going to give you that extra 125%. But if you go for status and you go with 2 dual stat mods, you'll actually do an extra 120% already because of the element that comes with dual stat mods, 60-60. And then you have the status. So you lose out in like 5% of the damage, but you gain abilities to cause status effects that may bring in more damage. So suddenly in that sense, even though you have 20% critical chance, you might not want to go for a critical build. Now I'm gonna list down some multiplier, and the general rule is you want to have as many multipliers as you can on your weapon to make it stronger. So let's start. Let's say multipliers. Okay, so the first one is damage multiplier. This is like your Serration, your Hornet Strike, those kind of things. Then we have multi-strike or multi-shot, multi-strike, what is it called, multi-strike? Let's call it multi-shot. But multi-shot is only applicable to guns, I believe. Another multiplier is going to be your elemental and also your PSI. Okay, your physical, like puncher, slash, and impact. What else do we have? Attack speed is also a multiplier. Attack speed. The problem with attack speed is that it's also linked to your reload speed, and we can actually find a way to find the average of the damage that you'll be doing, including the reload speed. I actually did a video before in the past. Maybe I'll refresh your memory and do one in the future. But attack speed is definitely one of the multipliers as well. Imagine if you are attacking, 10 hits per 10 seconds, and if you were to double your attack speed, then you are actually doing 20 hits, and therefore your DPS is actually increased by a multiplier as well. Okay, then we have the factions, right? So factions like the Bane mods, and then we also have our critical. I can't really think of anything else, but there are other things like body shot multiplier. There are abilities that can also give you a separate multiplier, so those into account as well. But since we are talking about weapons and how to mod them, these are probably the few possible ways that you can increase your multiplier. Now when it comes to faction mods, the problem with it is that usually you only have one mod for it, and it's about like 30% if I'm not mistaken, those Bane mods. And when you mod it for faction, normally you can't really use it in general because it's very specific. It's for that particular faction, and if you use it for a different faction, that mod and that mod slot is going to be wasted. So I know a lot of people, including myself, that like to not use faction mods just so that we can use the same weapons in all kinds of scenarios. Attack speed is tied to your reload, so the faster you attack, the faster you actually get to the reload time. So if you attack really fast, then your reload speed will actually have a toll on your total DPS. Not to mention on weapons that has really low ammo efficiency, you're gonna run out of ammo really quickly. So again, attack speed sometimes not very favorable. However, there are abilities like the Peacemaker, the one with Mesa that I talked about quite a few times now. That one does not have a reload, nor does it require any ammo, so having attack speed on that one is actually a really good multiplier. So what's left is the damage, multi-shot, the elemental and PSI, and also your critical. Damage and multiplier, in my opinion, is a must. Pretty much any weapon that you mod for, you want to have the damage, for example, pressure point, serration, hornet strike, those kind of things. And when it comes to multi-shot, it's things like split chamber. Now then we come to elemental and PSI, which I also think you definitely need. So what we can do here is we can theory craft a situation where maybe you have 2 damage mods, 2 multi-shot mods, 2 elemental mods, and you have 2 left, which is either going to be critical mods or dual stat mods. And then we have to decide whether it should be a critical mod or dual stat mods. And then we can come to a conclusion based on the weapons base critical chance and critical damage. Should you go for status or should you go for critical? Of course, this will also take into account whether that weapon has good status chance as well, because otherwise if its status chance is negligible, then going for status chance is just really pushing it. And to be honest, I haven't really wrapped my head around how I'm going to actually compare status with critical yet, but for now this is sort of like the foundation that I want to share with you guys so that it will make more sense in the next video and also the video after that. I have a feeling we are going to cover this particular topic for at least another 2 videos. Before we end this topic, I do want to say that Scarlet Spear looks really fun and everything, but it really did not pull me in that much. I saw some videos on how to do it and I just felt like it's just more grinding. For a player that's been playing for so many years, I feel like handling the Warframe and the environment and everything, it's just no longer that interesting to me. In fact, weirdly enough, figuring these things out is kind of like more fun for me and hopefully more useful to you. So that is it that I like to say. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.